Welcome to the annual meeting 2013 of the World Economic Forum.
It's perhaps a little warmer than most people had expected.
I think today people clearly recognize and understand the India opportunity, the India story.
Participation from India, even on the panel. As people were discovering India, now India is known. It's our time to execute.
The 43rd edition of the World Economic Forum formally did kick off in Davos in this beautiful ski resort in Switzerland. The mood clearly is, and the focus almost seems to be Europe yet again, as it was last time. But the global signs of worry, the global fault lines are at least beginning to diminish, if not disappear completely. So that's really the mood on the ground. Last year people were all talking about whether Eurozone will survive as a single currency bloc or not. At least those kind of concerns have been taken care of. As far as India's own participation is concerned, many people believe it has gone down significantly. The question that we ask to many CEOs is why is that? And a lot of them do say it's perhaps because the India story is so well sold and so well told that it doesn't need to be hard, there doesn't need to be any hard selling anymore, and which is perhaps why we see participation. But yeah, some of the biggest names in India continue to be here, from Mukesh Ambani to Sunil Mittal to Azim Premji to their Kotak. Those are the kind of people who continue to be here. Strangely enough, however, most people that we spoke to, stakeholders in the Indian economy, stakeholders in Indian financial markets, are not talking about the reforms that one has seen in the last 4 months. They're all squarely focused, not even on the budget, but on general elections 2014, and it is that outcome of the elections, it is that outcome of the electoral process which will decide where does Indian economy go, what kind of funds will be pumped in, and what really happens to our capital markets from here on. But as the world congregates here to discuss the prospects of what really happens with resilient dynamism, it is Britain that's keeping the world guessing all along. The Prime Minister David Cameron today telling Britons that they will have a referendum choice if they were to be elected in 2015, whether or not they would want to stay in the single currency bloc or not. Many people thought that this decision may not come so soon, but it has. Britain clearly not caring as much for economic prospects and allies at this stage. 2015 to 2017 is the time frame David Cameron has given, and he's really kept the world economy on course with that one single statement.
The next Conservative manifesto in 2015 will ask for a mandate from the British people for a Conservative government to negotiate a new settlement with our European partners in the next Parliament. It will be a relationship with the single market at its heart. And when we have negotiated that new settlement, we will give the British people a referendum with a very simple in or out choice: to stay in the European Union on these new terms or to come out altogether.
Many people are of the view that India's participation in the World Economic Forum is indeed dwindling. There are fewer India-focused panels, fewer CEOs are speaking on those panels, and which is why I asked a question to most of the big-ticket CEOs who were here. Is this a sign of a dwindling importance as well, or is the India story well told, well sold? And does Davos not embrace India as much as it should? We get to the biggest voices from India Inc. with their take on that one simple question.
As far as attendance is concerned, I think the last few years have seen tremendous participation from India, even on the panels. As people were discovering India, now India is known. It's our time to execute. So there would be newer countries which are getting discovered now, which would be more on the panels. But it's our time to act and execute, so that's what we've got to be busy doing.
I don't think so. I think today people clearly recognize and understand the India opportunity, the India story. I think given where the global economy is, there is still a significant opportunity compared to others in India. And really, I think people now need to come in, get in, and be a part of that story. And there's also at the same point a lot that happens beyond the sessions. There are private events, there are a whole host of functions and events that take place in smaller groups with a lot of people. And there India certainly gets discussed very extensively.
Participation has gone down because and that's what I'm going to complain right now. I'm meeting the forum members.
Why do you think it has happened?
Because they think China is doing better.
And what will change that perception?
That will change the perception. I'm trying to get it changed right now. Let's see what happens.
India's participation has gone down significantly. since the last few years. Is that a sign of our dwindling presence on global economic forum like a WEF here in Davos, or is it because the India story has been well told and well sold?
Well, I think India's story is being told and being sold, but the world has got preoccupied with their own hassles last 3 years. So if a little bit of space has gone away, I think it's more to do with what else is happening rather than India itself. So India is still seen as a market of big hope, and it still is talked about. So I don't see the India interest waning, but there are other issues which are taking, I think, bigger priority given the problems of the world.
There is a great future for India. You know, there is a huge plan where the foreigners are going to invest in India in a big way.
The last 4 months in India have all been about big-ticket reforms, tough economic decision-making has happened. And which is why the question really is, have euphoric capital markets really kept pace with reality? Or is this a structured bull rally at all? What about growth? When does that pick up? How will investments kickstart? These are some of the questions that we did ask Uday Kotak. And of course, a very important point that we asked him is retail participants who have really shunned the equity markets, what will it take to get them back? And Unplugged Uday Kotak right here on Davos Direct.
Therefore, when I look at Davos 2013 versus 12, 2012 was about gloom and doom Europe. 2013, remarkably, is of the view, at least here at Davos, that there is unlikely to be a crisis in Europe, and Europe will have low growth but will muddle its way.
Will stay afloat.
That's correct. On the other hand, people are a little pessimistic about US in the short run because of what's happening to the politics there, and are actually predicting 1 to 2% GDP growth.
When you refer to a fat tail, and this is a risk we are perhaps running into, is India not at the receiving end of that risk? Because that money is going to flow into India, and it will also flow out overnight.
But right now, that's precisely the point. But India is at a situation where, for the challenges to its current account, it needs that money in the short run. Therefore, the mood at Davos is of two kinds vis-a-vis India. On the strategic side, I think the mood is cooler than what it was a few years ago. The strategics are not warming up in a hurry. But portfolio money, which has got lots of liquidity and low interest rates and is chasing returns in the short to medium term, I think is continuing to get interested in India. And markets are therefore ahead of reality.
The last 4 months have perhaps seen life come back to governance. Everybody is please talking about some kind of policy making happening, which was happening to see from a time that nothing was happening. How soon will you see that convert into reality on the ground?
There is a difference in the last few months. The mood has got better.
Even on the ground?
In terms of a belief that things will happen. And we have seen a few things happen. I think the diesel price increase and the proposed baby step deregulation is a move in the right direction.
Nobody thought diesel would be.
Exactly. And then you've seen rail fare hikes, you've seen pretty significant
you get a sense that the government is getting it back together.
Commitment
That's right.
to making sure that the fiscal deficit is under control. I wish this had happened 1 year ago, in a sense that the government had more time before the next election.
Markets have rallied, 25 to 28%? And this is largely on account of the FII inflows that have come in. Do we run the risk of, like we said, right now, yes, the situation is that everybody wants to invest money in India, but do you see the situation continue all into 2013?
Let me give you a paradox which India is currently under. India is importing foreign savings into Indian equities. But India is exporting Indian savings into foreign gold. So Indian saver is not buying Indian equities. And if we are going to change the fundamentals of the Indian macro, we have to get the Indian saver away from gold. And I think the alternate asset class, which we must be able to convince him to come, is equities.
By how many basis points do you see rates drop in this entire calendar year?
75 to 100 basis points.
75 to 100, and that you think will be
And out of
good
which
enough?
50 basis points in the first quarter. And the reason
So you
why...
actually see only 25 basis points drop from March to December?
725 to 50. Because you've got to look at your current account.
India did not cut rates as they were expected to in the last policy, and he walked out of the North Block and said that if the government has to walk, if North Block has to walk alone on growth, so we will. Obviously saying the RBI, go ahead there, cut rates, two separate institutions. But Do you think some of the criticism that India Inc. has leveled against the RBI of stifling growth is justified at one level? Do you think we've been overly cautious about reining in inflation?
See, we have got to look at what is the dharma of each institution. And if inflation, WPI is 7% plus and CPI is 10% plus, it is pretty difficult for a central bank to dramatically drop rates. Unlike the rest of the world, where along with low growth is still low inflation, India is demonstrating much higher inflation. So we need to ensure that we balance this. Second, our external account is weak, and therefore dramatically dropping interest rates can put pressure on the external account. So you've got to balance that as well.
So you're one of the few leaders of India who believe that Subbarao has been doing a good job.
So my view is that it's all about getting the balance right. And I do believe that we need from here to soften monetary policy and see a little bit of balancing inflation objectives with growth, because the two are linked, and in India there are a lot of supply side issues. But we just got to keep the balance, which is why 75 to 100 basis points is something which I think we can do in the year.
Few quick last questions, because we've spoken about the macro picture at large, we've spoken about the capital markets. We still continue to be threatened by rating agencies about a downgrade. Do you think this is something that they do on a periodic basis? Are we giving them reasons enough not to downgrade us? Will you be surprised if they do? Where are you in this entire...
I think we have done a lot in the last 4 to 6 months to avoid a downgrade. But we've got to focus finally on our external account.
That's right.
One of the things that we've got to be careful about is that if we start growing too fast,
That's right.
the external account will have more pressure, because our external account is high import intensive linked to growth.
That's right.
Therefore, we actually have to be careful
And
about
exports
high...
have actually kept dwindling
That's
all
correct.
this while.
And it brings me to a very fundamental real economy issue. We have to get more competitive. Somewhere in the last 8 to 10 years, in our aspiration for growth, and corporate India is responsible for that as well, is that we've forgotten our competitiveness. And
When you say competitive, what benchmarking?
the best example of competitiveness is how competitive are we on exports. We are guzzling foreign goods into India. What about the exportability and competitiveness of India to selling our goods out? And bulk of our exports in the past were commodities, whether it's agriculture, whether it's iron ore. So if you don't export iron ore, India is not competitive to export finished goods.
That's right. We'll keep importing oil and gold. 2012 has also seen an unprecedented slump as far as asset quality of banks is concerned, especially the public sector space. Given the macroeconomy picture, given the lag effect, and perhaps growth will pick up, and of course the obvious impact is on banks and their balance sheets, do you think the worst is behind us?
This time around in 2012, unlike the earlier cycles, we saw asset quality issues which were very sectoral. Essentially infrastructure, construction equipment, and now some softness in commercial vehicle segment.
Right.
On the other hand, the consumer side has held up extremely well. So unlike 2008, when we saw the consumer side also have trouble,
Right.
that side is holding up. And small businesses, remarkably, at least that's what we see in our bank, are holding up pretty well.
John Sadowski, the Senior Managing Director of Blackstone in the United States, continues to assert that India is India and investments will continue to be pumped into this market despite all our problems. A very bullish John, however, does say, and that's an interesting insight, that India is not one investment destination. These are many states that contribute to that investment destination, and according to him right now, Gujarat tops that list. John Sadowski, right here on ET Now on Davos Direct.
The emerging markets are going to remain, I think, very exciting for a lot of investors. China, India, Russia, and Brazil, they're going to remain exciting. Lots more capital, I think, is looking at Indonesia and Turkey. The Europe environment is going to be plus or minus flat. We're sort of walking through the plateau, walking through the valley.
Do you see money coming back to India, money that was perhaps being held back because people were nervous?
I think people were nervous about India because a lot of the big sound bites. They're nervous about the perception of stagnant leadership. They're nervous about the fact that it's not a federally run country, it's a state-run country, and people that know India have great preference for certain states. And I think that they're also worried about the the power transition. Corruption continues to be on everyone's mind, but the reality is smart companies understand and have to manage corruption and have to have very strict policies about corruption. So for people to say they're not going to invest in India because of these short-term considerations is rather silly, or is rather rubbish. I mean, India is India, and one has to be there. It's a very big footprint on the planet. Now, I look at India on a state-by-state level. There are certain states, and everyone always highlights Gujarat as the sort of poster child, the role model, because of the Modi leadership. But that is a very good role model, and candidly it has helped draw capital and attention and respect to India.
So you believe, but do you believe the Modi model can be replicated across states? That's not possible. So will we always see investment come into specific states and not really India at large?
Well, why can't the Modi model be replicated across states? Why can't young girls go to schools, separate schools from young boys?
India's growth has crippled and tripled considerably. We were growing at 8.5%. We might end up growing at 5.5% for our fiscal year. The question then is, why are assets still not cheap in India? Why are distressed assets not cheap in India?
Well, a very good question. I mean, lots of people have raised that question. A lot of economists raise that question. A lot of market speculators raise that question. I think it's because people still see it as one of the interesting emerging markets. There's great hope with the pending clarification of leadership that the country is going to take on perhaps a more economic friendly model, a more finance friendly model, a more investment friendly model. So I think that's probably why assets well, and also Indians are tough negotiators. They have they can be very stubborn about their views about asset values, and sometimes they can hold off for quite a long time before they want to negotiate or do a deal.
While we're talking about tough negotiations, let me ask you, which are the sectors that still excite you in India? Which are the sectors that you're bullish on?
Well, I think you have to be excited about anything that has to do with the consumer. You have to be excited to do with anything that has to do with infrastructure. Infrastructure, on the other hand, is a state-by-state element. The consumer, of course, the other side of that is logistics, and the logistics and transport in India is still probably one of the major constraints.
What about private equity investment? It has been a very muted sort of a last few months to a year maybe. Will we see that space revive and that space generate deals in 2013, that is?
I think there's going to be an interregnum until there's a greater clarification. I think the finance ministry has done a lot to give people more confidence in the country. There's no question. Thank God for some of the things the finance ministry has done. I think it's all been very constructive and very positive. Whether this, I think when you talk about private equity, you have to remember that's sort of a broader brand for, proactive investment in the country. I think people want to invest in the country. They want to invest in more states. They actually want to better understand the leadership transition that is obviously in the process of taking place.
Do you see the IPO market pick up in India? Because a lot of the private equity investment is actually held up and that way wants to exit. Do you see that pick up at all, the IPO market?
I don't know if the IPO market is going to pick up until, again, we get some clarity as to where the country is going on the leadership front.
In India and across the world, largely it is believed that this election will be all about Rahul Gandhi versus Narendra Modi, both individuals known to you. Here is a man who's trying to woo the youth. He has these young ideas, and Mr. Modi is the poster boy of development.
It's too bad you couldn't have a sort of William and Mary or a sort of a happy partnership there, because the reality is they complement each other very well. I don't like the people who talk about the views that the jury is out on Rahul Gandhi. The reality is he may be the opposite, whereas Barack Obama is an impeccably good campaigner, and that's led him into the White House now twice. Maybe Rahul Gandhi is not the best campaigner, but his father was a very good prime minister, and it may well be that he has those same genes, and he will be a good prime minister. Mr. Modi, on the other hand, who is, we know out of the textbook of the Singaporean mentor Lee Kuan Yew, is, the great sort of leader when it comes to economic model regeneration.
Do you think India's image has taken an immense beating because of the whole corruption and the graft debate that has come in the public fore, and out in public debates because of the whole civil society movement? Or do you think that has been factored in for emerging markets at large?
I think the issue, it's a different issue. I think the issue is not graft and corruption are present in many countries, in many emerging markets. I think the issue is the perception that the government was not prepared to deal with it. So the issue wasn't the existence of the graft and corruption. The bigger concern I think foreign investors would take is the unwillingness of the government to be seen to be dealing with it.
Do you think that Walmart story, which has been replicated across the world, can be replicated in a market like India?
Even the model itself with some of these large retailers has had to be refined in China and refined in Latin America to suit the idiosyncrasies of the market. And I think the same thing's going to apply to India. The banking system is still one of the, 2 or 3 better, more prudently managed banking systems in the world, and we don't give India sort of credit for that. And I think we have to remember the same standards should apply to the insurance and the pensions industry.
Should corporates be allowed in the banking space?
Well, if they hire the right people with the right expertise, they should be allowed into it. I think it depends on their business model. I think it also depends on the future of Indian society. Financial services is evolving.
Davos is not just about economy or rattled ones at that or financial markets. It also has to do with tech titans. I did catch up with Michael Dell and made him a little uncomfortable by talking about and drawing comparisons with Apple. Why is it that Steve Jobs' company is far cooler? Why is it that Apple has more recall value with consumers and Dell doesn't? While Michael Dell does take those questions forcingly, he did point out to me that as far as Dell's share in the IT space is concerned and Apple, it pales in comparison. Players like yourselves and HP are not being spoken about as top-of-mind recall. Does that worry you?
Well, the IT industry is actually quite broad, and it's natural for people to focus on consumer devices, and that's certainly an important part of the market, but the market's much broader. Dell, of course, is an end-to-end IT solutions provider, and in the last 5 years or so, we've grown that part of our business from roughly 14 billion to about 20 billion, and certainly emerging countries like India have been a big part of that growth, and we continue to invest in end-to-end IT solutions.
Does it not worry you that people across the world, and most cool people here in this room and in this forum, are either using an iPad tab or a Samsung tab? Doesn't that bother you? Wouldn't you want a product like that to be on this forum?
Well, we've also introduced very recently here our Windows 8 tablets, and Windows 8 has just come out. I think there's some interesting new products always coming out around Windows 8, and that is providing a great alternative to customers. Remember, there are 1.5 billion PCs in the world, and while there are lots of other interesting devices, the PC still plays a very important role, and we're kind of reinventing the PC now with Windows 8.
There is a lot of euphoria about products from Apple and Samsung. Do you think this euphoria is it long-lived or is it short-lived? Do you think this will end soon?
You have to ask them.
What is in your assessment? Are you an Apple or a Samsung user at all?
What I'm focused on is how can we address the changing requirements that our customers have. So, for example, in mobility, we're very active in helping our customers secure their environment. One of the challenges when you bring personal devices into work is all of the security threats that this represents. And Dell plays a major role in helping customers secure their IT environment. So we are a company that really goes beyond devices into helping customers really address the challenges they have.
Are you here suggesting you're making an iPad to be used in office far more secure than it is?
Oh, our Windows 8 tablets absolutely are far more secure than any other kind of tablet because it works with all of the security protocols and infrastructure that customers already have.
Is the euphoria around Apple justified?
Well, you have to ask them.
The big story, the big picture, the big debate, and the big issues. It's all happening here at Davos, and we at ET Now will continue to get you all the details. Before we wrap the show here, however, it's not just about economy, it's not just about finances, it's about beautiful people as well. We leave you with one of them.
You see the joy that they have, they never fall to the sense of victim. They don't feel like victims. And I think that is the thing that always drives me